Usually when we talk about building something, there's this underlying expectation of absolute precision. Like you want to build a house, you hire an architect, you secure a highly detailed blueprint.
All right, you pour a rigid foundation and you just follow the instructions line by line.
Exactly. It's a process entirely defined by predictability. You put in the exact materials and you expect to get the exact result. But when you step into the world of building a legacy, especially a family legacy or a spiritual one, that blueprint completely vanishes.
Yeah, it really does. You find yourself navigating this incredibly murky landscape. The metrics for success are entirely different from literally anything society teaches us.
Which is, it's the absolute definition of building in the dark. And that tension is exactly what we are unpacking today.
Welcome, everybody, to a very special deep dive we're calling Zion Recap.
I've been looking forward to this one. Me too. So today, our focus is on a profoundly challenging Father's Day message. It was delivered on June 21st, 2026 at Zion Christian Communities by missionary Mauricio. And his story just completely dismantles our everyday conventional ideas of success.
It forces you to redefine what it actually means to leave something of value behind for the next generation. And just a quick reminder for everyone listening, if you want to hear the full, unedited sermon, just head over to Zion CC's YouTube page and find the video with the exact same title.
Yes, definitely do that. And also, we'll mention this again later, but if you ever need clarification or just have questions about anything you hear today, please come to small groups on Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. We would love to talk with you in person.
Absolutely. Wednesdays at 6:30, it's the perfect place to unpack all this.
Right. So let's jump straight into Mauricio's background because, honestly, the trajectory of his early life really sets the stage for everything that follows. He actually moves from Mexico to Colorado as a young 13-year-old immigrant.
And he didn't waste any time, right? By 17, he's heading off to a biblical seminary in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and as a quick aside, he actually meets his wife there. He makes this great joke in the sermon that they got married for love and paperwork. Like he brought the love and she brought the immigration paperwork.
That's hilarious. But, it also really underscores the real-world complexities of his life back then.
Yeah.
After seminary, they moved back to Colorado, and Mauricio secures a position as a police officer.
Which he does for 10 solid years.
Yeah.
And, if we analyze that trajectory purely from a sociological standpoint, it's like the quintessential triumph of the American dream.
Oh, 100%. He arrives in a new country as a teenager and eventually secures this highly respected, stable, pension-backed government job. By every modern cultural metric, he has conquered the pursuit of success.
He achieved the exact life that thousands of people spend decades striving for.
Yeah.
He had the massive house, he drove the beautiful massive truck, he secured absolute financial stability for his family.
But the reality of maintaining that lifestyle was, it was incredibly dark. To keep that dream afloat, he was working 60 to 70 hours a week.
Wow. 60 to 70 hours.
Yeah. And in his message, he shares this heartbreaking vulnerability. He genuinely does not remember his son Caleb's first words.
Oh, man. That hurts to even hear.
And he missed seeing his daughter Zoe walk for the very first time.
Yeah.
Because he was either always working or, when he finally was home, he was just entirely depleted.
Right. It's like, it reminds me of running on a treadmill. You keep turning up the speed to buy bigger and better things, so you're running faster and faster, but you end up missing all the scenery.
That is exactly what it's like.
And in this case, the scenery is your family's actual lives happening right next to you.
The cultural pressure placed on fathers to perform as providers is just immense, and it really takes on a unique intensity within immigrant communities. There's this deep-seated, often generational drive to equate material provision with love.
So the internalized logic is basically, if I'm providing a better material baseline than the one I inherited, I am succeeding as a father.
Exactly. The danger, though, is that society's measurement of a father's success focuses entirely on the external structure, while completely ignoring the internal decay.
It's like a real estate developer building a massive skyscraper directly over a sinkhole. You just keep adding floors to the building, you upgrade to the bigger house, so you build a new level, you finance the nicer truck, another level.
And to the outside world, the structure looks incredibly impressive.
Right. But underneath, the foundation of your actual family life is quietly collapsing. You're pouring all this energy into the facade, completely missing the fact that your family's actual lives are happening in rooms you're never even present to walk through.
The structural integrity is just compromised, but Mauricio reaches this massive pivot point during a 2014 mission trip to Spain. That's where he recognizes this collapse.
Yeah, and he realizes that the ultimate legacy you can leave your kids isn't a five-bedroom house or a heavily funded bank account. The best legacy is modeling a life of radical obedience to God.
And the catalyst for that realization involves a staggering detail about his wife's endurance. This was during those 10 years he spent working as a police officer.
This detail, honestly, this might be the most challenging part of the entire source material for me. So for the decade that Mauricio was distracted, adding floors to that American dream skyscraper instead of pursuing their missionary calling, his wife did not nag him.
Not once. She never raised her voice about it. She never initiated arguments demanding he change careers.
For 10 solid years, she just prayed in silence. She faithfully held onto the conviction that God would redirect their path in his timing.
Which, I mean, viewing that through a modern cultural lens makes her actions almost incomprehensible to us today.
Oh, totally. We live in an era that demands immediate intervention. If something is misaligned, we are taught to voice our displeasure instantly and force a resolution.
Right, but her silence wasn't a form of passive resignation. It was this incredibly active form of spiritual warfare. She understood the profound difference between trying to control her husband and trusting the spiritual process.
She held the line for their family's true legacy while he was just captivated by a cultural illusion. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But breaking that cycle requires walking away from the comfort of a 10-year career and stepping into a complete void.
Which brings us to the tension of his actual calling. When Mauricio finally steps away from the American dream to become a missionary in Spain, he quickly discovers that God's requirements for service look, well, nothing like a corporate job description.
Yeah, God doesn't seem to require perfection or extreme talent. He just requires a will and heart.
Mauricio is actually incredibly self-deprecating when discussing his own qualifications. He describes himself as entirely unhandy, like an ordinary guy who jokes that he can't even hammer a nail into a piece of wood properly.
Right, and yet the initial assignment he receives is a ministry property in Spain that includes an orchard of 110 olive trees and a massive 120,000-liter pool.
It's a huge undertaking.
Okay, let me pause here and push back on this a little bit. Because this narrative of the unqualified hero is common, but it's one thing to be bad at assembling basic furniture.
Sure.
Managing an olive orchard and maintaining aquatic infrastructure that size requires genuine technical skill. I mean, 120,000 liters is roughly 4 times the size of a standard residential pool. So if someone is genuinely unhandy, at what point does being ordinary or unqualified become a genuine liability instead of an inspiring story?
That is a very fair question. The line between radical faith and sheer foolishness is a tension present in almost every historical account of missionary work.
Right, because you can't just pray the pool clean without doing the work.
Exactly. But Mauricio's operating philosophy addresses this directly. He believes God looks for availability over ability. The underlying theology here is that human limitation actually provides the preferred canvas for divine intervention.
So when a highly skilled person accomplishes a task, the credit goes to their training. But when an unqualified person succeeds, it points to God.
Precisely.
I understand the theology, but pragmatically, he still had a giant pool to deal with. And the water supply wasn't strong enough to fill it normally, so he literally had to use muddy irrigation water.
Oh yeah, he describes it as looking like a giant pool of dark hot chocolate.
Which is gross. And to raise the stakes even higher, another church contacted him and asked to use this specific pool for a baptism service.
Yeah, he even joked that the water was so filthy people would emerge from the baptism with more sins than they had when they went in.
That is so funny.
Yeah.
But seriously, how does an unhandy person solve a massive water purification crisis with a hard deadline?
Well, he spent 3 grueling days purifying that water, using nothing but his faith, and a relentless deep dive into YouTube tutorial.
YouTube. The savior of the unhandy.
Exactly. He didn't just pray over the mud and expect it to vanish. He had to learn the actual mechanics of water chemistry on the fly. He was researching chemical flocculants that bind to mud particles so they sink.
Wow.
Yeah, and understanding how to manually vacuum the debris to waste so it wouldn't ruin the filtration system. It required balancing the pH and running heavy-duty pumps around the clock.
So the liability of being unqualified was neutralized by his sheer willingness to engage with the problem, learn the mechanisms, and just do the exhausting physical labor.
Right. It's the perfect intersection of spiritual availability and practical effort.
But, cleaning a muddy pool, as physically demanding as it is, still relies on elements you can somewhat control. The narrative escalates significantly when the obstacles shift from manual labor to massive financial hurdles.
Financial hurdles are the ultimate stress test for this principle of availability. primarily because they expose our deep, deep reliance on material security.
Absolutely. Mauricio shares this wild story of attempting to purchase a cave property in the mountains to use as a ministry base. The asking price for the property is $85,000,
And Mauricio and his team have exactly $2,000 to their name.
which is just despite being $83,000 short. He boldly signs the purchase paperwork anyway. He gives the seller their entire $2,000 and promises to fly back to the United States and raise the remaining balance in just 6 weeks.
The seller's reaction really grounds this story in reality, too. He literally laughs at Mauricio and explicitly tells him that if he doesn't return with the funds, that deposit is forfeit.
Which makes sense. From a purely secular accounting perspective, signing a contract without capital is the height of irresponsibility. It's like jumping out of an airplane and fully expecting to knit your own parachute on the way down.
That is the perfect analogy, and the timeline makes the situation terrifying. He spends weeks visiting various churches across the U.S. trying to raise the capital, but he falls significantly short.
So it comes down to the absolute final week. And he finds himself speaking at a tiny church in Los Angeles on a Wednesday night. And anyone familiar with church culture knows a Wednesday night service is usually a very small, highly dedicated crowd.
Yeah, there are exactly 15 people in attendance that night.
Just 15 people. And after he finishes preaching, a 30-year-old man approaches him. And Mauricio notes that major financial donors are traditionally older, established individuals, right?
Usually, yes. But this 30-year-old explains that he felt a direct prompting from God during the message, and he proceeds to donate $15,000 right there on the spot.
That is insane. And that single moment acts as this massive catalyst. Within just 8 hours of that $15,000 donation, Mauricio starts receiving unprompted phone calls from various other churches and individuals.
Someone pledges $3,000, another pledges $2,000.
Piece by piece, over the course of an 8-hour window, they hit the exact $85,000 total.
That 8-hour window must have been one of the most agonizing and clarifying experiences of his entire life. Seriously, you are sitting there, the clock is practically at zero, and you're watching the exact provision materialize through completely random phone calls.
It completely redefines how we view risk. In the context of his journey, signing that initial contract wasn't a reckless gamble. It was an act of absolute conviction built on a developing track record of trusting God.
And the scale continues to grow, right? They are currently repeating this exact process, having just signed a 6-year contract for a $300,000 life center.
Trusting that the provision will arrive just as it did for the cave. And Mauricio really emphasizes that experiencing this kind of extraordinary provision is not an exclusive benefit reserved for official titled missionaries.
It's accessible to anyone in any profession who is willing to trust implicitly. Which really brings us to the most crucial question of this deep dive. What is the actual reward for living this kind of high-stress, sacrificial, trusting life?
That is the core Father's Day message right there. Mauricio answers this by tying his own modern experiences back to a very specific biblical figure from Mark chapter 15, Simon of Cyrene. Right. And for context, Simon was simply a bystander. He was coming in from the country, minding his own business, when Roman soldiers forced him to carry the cross of Jesus to the crucifixion site.
The historical reality of that moment is just brutal. The Romans practiced this thing called impressment. A Roman soldier could literally tap a civilian on the shoulder with a spear and legally compel them to carry gear or perform forced labor.
So Simon was stripped of his autonomy in an instant. He was basically just being nosy and got pulled into this.
Exactly. And carrying a cross, specifically the crossbar, which was often covered in the blood of the condemned, was an incredibly humiliating, traumatizing, and physically grueling public spectacle. He was dragged into an execution entirely against his will.
Which makes you wonder, how does a forced traumatic event like carrying an execution cross turn into a positive family legacy?
Well, this is where Mauricio makes a brilliant scriptural connection. He takes us from the trauma of Mark 15 all the way to the book of Romans, chapter 16.
Yeah, I was looking at the cross-references for this. In Romans, the Apostle Paul is writing his final greetings to various members of the early Christian church. And Paul warmly greets a man named Rufus.
He specifically calls Rufus chosen in the Lord and mentions that Rufus's mother had been like a mother to Paul as well.
And the profound connection here is that back in Mark 15, the text explicitly identifies Simon of Cyrene as the father of Rufus.
The theological and practical implications of that connection are just massive. The encounter that Simon was violently forced into ultimately completely rewired his family tree.
The father endured a forced, agonizing burden, And the direct spiritual result was that his son became a chosen, recognized, and deeply beloved leader in the early church.
Mauricio draws a direct parallel between Simon's experience and the reality facing countless fathers today. I mean, think about the men listening to this Father's Day message. So many fathers are forced into incredibly difficult, heartbreaking situations right now.
Fathers who are forced to migrate away from their homelands due to violence or poverty. Fathers forced to take on grueling, destructive manual labor.
Fathers forced to work exhausting night shifts just to keep their families fed. Mauricio is offering a profound reframing of that suffering.
He argues that if these fathers take those forced, agonizing burdens and consciously dedicate that labor to God, the narrative completely shifts.
Yes. The grueling night shift or the painful migration is no longer just a desperate bid for survival. It transforms into a spiritual investment.
And because of that dedicated sacrifice, their children will reap the spiritual dividends. They transition from being victims of economic or geographical circumstance to becoming chosen leaders in their own right.
Which brings Mauricio's own journey completely full circle.
Yeah, he started out exhausted, running himself into the ground to build that American dream skyscraper, completely missing his kids growing up. But when he shifted his focus and dedicated his life to God's calling in Spain, the entire legacy of his family changed.
He notes that his ultimate pride today isn't a massive house in Colorado or a flawless truck. His greatest pride, his true Rufus moment, really is looking at the stage and seeing his wife preaching.
And watching his children actively serving in ministry every single Sunday. He stopped trying to leave something for his children, like property or status, and finally succeeded in leaving something in them.
A legacy of faith, a legacy of radical obedience, and a first-hand understanding of how God utilizes ordinary people to accomplish the extraordinary.
It is such a powerful perspective shift. And, if examining this dynamic between building a superficial life and leaving a lasting spiritual legacy has sparked something in you today, you really need to hear the rest of Mauricio's message.
You really do.
You can find the full unedited Father's Day sermon by heading over to the Zion CC YouTube page and searching for the exact same title.
And we also want to formally invite you to step out of isolation and bring these topics into a community setting. If you have questions about what it means to dedicate your current burdens to God, or if you just need clarification on anything we covered today, join our small groups.
Yes, please do. Small groups are held every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m., and we would absolutely love to talk with you in person.
Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Don't miss it. And to catch the latest sermon and continue growing in this community, join us on Sunday at either 9 or 11 a.m.
We also need to mention briefly that Zion uses AI tools to help summarize information, condense sermons, and compile common questions.
Yeah. And while our team works incredibly hard to ensure everything remains accurate, AI can sometimes make mistakes or hallucinate details.
So we always encourage you to engage with the primary source material directly. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own.
Give it to us.
We spent this time examining how Simon of Cyrene's violently forced burden ultimately became the vehicle for his family's greatest spiritual blessing. But we also talked about Mauricio running on the treadmill of the American dream. So look at your own life right now. If a stranger were to look at exactly where you spend your time and your resources right now, what kind of legacy would they assume you are trying to leave behind?
Wow. That is a heavy question to end on.
It is, but it's one we all need to ask ourselves. Thanks for joining us on this Zion Recap. We will see you next time.